got to be kidding me.
McConnell underneath the basket. Looking, Toppin in the corner for three.
Oh, yeah! Yeah! OB!
Pacers have it, a chance to tie.
Yeah, Nembhard
hits the three. Nembhard gives Indiana the lead.
Hello, Pacer fans, and welcome back to the Pacers Fever Show, your home for all things blue and gold during this postseason run and throughout the regular season. I'm your host, Logan, and today we are discussing that massive Game 4 win tonight that the Pacers had over the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're going to break down key performances, momentum-shifting moments, and what this win means for the Indiana Pacers. They are now just one game away from eliminating the top-seeded team in the Eastern Conference. You don't want to miss this one. Pacer Nation is fired up. Number 1 Cavs versus the number 4 Pacers. And I cannot believe the game and the response that the Indiana Pacers had coming off that Game 3 loss at home. Embarrassed, to be quite honest. Not a good game. One of the worst games the Pacers have played throughout the season and in this postseason. In Game 3, just didn't show up, didn't have the fight, didn't have the intensity. But in Game 4, they came back with their biggest punch of the postseason and dropped a ton of points on the Cavs in the first half. 80 points in that first half on incredible shooting, incredible intensity, and a great effort on the defensive end. So let's go through it. We're going to talk about the game, but before we get into that, we're going to talk about the schedule, the upcoming games, so that way you know where you can find them and when they will be on. So the number one seed Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Pacers. Game 5 will take place on Tuesday, which is going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern time on TNT. So again, that is Tuesday, May 13th, 7 p.m. Eastern time on TNT. Should a Game 6 be needed, the Cavs will come back to Indiana on Thursday, May 15th, time to be determined on ESPN. And if a Game 7 is needed, Pacers at Cavs, Sunday, May 18th, and that time and TV rights will, I guess, be determined at a later date. Let's hope the Pacers don't need any more games except for that Game 5 that is going to take place on Tuesday. I'm recording this on Sunday night after the Pacers. I've pretty much blown them out. I'm recording this as the Pacers are currently getting ready to end with a 3-1 series lead. And let's talk about just everything that goes into this game, everything that was or every adjustment that was made by the Pacers coming out of that Game 3 loss. Now, I didn't record after Game 3. We actually had a friend in town, and I was unable to record. And then I felt like on Mother's Day, people aren't really going to be listening to podcasts, so I didn't really record a preview for Game 4. I guess you could call me Tyrese Halliburton. Didn't show up after the loss. But again, I think Pacers PR were the ones that decided that Tyrese was not going to show up to the podium after Game 3. Honestly, as a Pacers fan, he always is held accountable for what he does or what he doesn't do in the games. He always answers to those. He always responds to those. So the fact that it didn't come right after the game, that you had to wait till the next day to hear it from him at practice, in the heat of the moment, sometimes I think players do say things, and we'll talk about the Cavs' reaction to Game 4, where maybe they shouldn't have let some of their players talk to the media, because you get these visceral reactions, you get the heat of the moment reactions from players, especially after tough losses, where a player might say something that is scrutinized and it can impact the player, but also, I think it being May and there's a big focus around mental health in May. I think you've got to give that space to players should they want it, and should people outside of their circle think that they need it. And Pacers PR is always one of the tops in the biz. And I think when you look at responding to that game, there wasn't really much to say about Game 3 except for the fact that the Pacers just weren't good. They lacked the intensity. I don't think that they would have been, heavily scrutinized, but I think Tyrese Halliburton, because of the performance that he had in Game 3, where he had just 4 points, I think that the national media, and they did this last year too, where they get on Tyrese, and it impacts a player's psyche a little bit in that mental health aspect. And I don't see a problem Tyrese missing out on the media. I think I understand where some of the people are coming from that are saying that, during a win, he'll come out and talk, but during a loss, Pacers PR kind of held him back. But he actually said that, they asked if he thought that he should have spoken up after Game 3, right after game 3, and he said, "Yeah, like I can own that one." Where should I have talked? Probably. Is it going to be something that I think about going forward? Probably not. I mean, we're all human. We all have real emotions. These people are not just robots. They also have to take care of themselves, their mental health, whatever it might be. So the fact that Tyrese didn't really talk to the media, did it bother me? Not really. I mean, I honestly, if all the players were like, you know what, we're never going to talk after post game. We're never going to talk in post game press conferences from now on. We're going to wait till the next day. Like if the NBA was like, yeah, we'll talk the next day. I don't think that would bother me too much. I mean, it gives players and coaches time to digest what happened, think about what they can do better. Think about that because there's been so many times where we've gotten live reactions from people on the field, on the court, whatever it might be, in the locker room, and horrible things are said, things that are just controversial are said, and then they're put underneath a magnifying glass. And I mean, these guys are all human. Imagine if you did something in your job, and then actually think about this: if you had a shift, every shift or whatever you work, every day after work, you had a post work conference and they could ask you questions. Sometimes that might not go so well, right? So you got to think about it like that. I mean, these people, at the end of the day, it is a job, as much as it is fun, and it's a sport, and it's a game. And as Tyrese called it, it's a child's game that he gets to play and get paid a lot of money to do, and that's just fun, and he loves his job. But think about it. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, a way to make a livelihood. And these guys are human. They're going to say human things. They're going to react in a way that is very human like. So I don't see an issue with it. But the reason why I got onto that was just that the Pacers responded on the court. They didn't have to respond in words. And that's been the thing with this team. I think if you watch this team for the last couple of years now, you understand where Pacer fans, and they get where the Pacers are coming from. They understand the fact that these Pacers are a team that will never go away and are competitive, and you can never count them out because, as they've proven time and time again, you can never put this Pacers team down. And we'll talk about right now, I guess, a little bit of that history, right? And we've talked about this in shows prior and episodes prior, where the Pacers in their postseason life over the last 2 years have been a team that has responded to adversity. So you go back to their very first playoff game with this core group with Halliburton, Nemhard, Neesmith, Turner, Siakam, Toppin, McConnell, and now you add in, or with Ben Shepherd, and now you add in guys like Thomas Bryant and Benedict Mathurin, who didn't play in last year's postseason. You add those guys into the mix, right? And you talk about a team that has been together for 2 years. So last year, when they start their playoff run, it's the first experience for most of these guys on this roster. You're talking about Halliburton, Nemhard, and Neesmith. I mean, Neesmith, no, but yes, Neesmith had some experience with the Celtics teams that were in the playoffs, but he got garbage time minutes. So, Neesmith is very inexperienced. Nemhard had no experience. Halliburton had no experience. Toppin had no experience. So you're talking about guys that really didn't experience that taste of postseason playoff basketball. And the first game, they come out and get absolutely smacked in the face by the Milwaukee Bucks in the first half. And then the Pacers kind of stabled that ship in the second half, made it a game, but they ended up still losing game 1 to open up their postseason run last year. And that postseason run took them all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals against a Boston team that went on to win the NBA title. But so game 1, second half, they respond, right? But they end up losing that game. Game 2, they come out, steal it in Milwaukee. They go into Indianapolis. They struggle in Indianapolis. But again, they respond to those struggles, ended up beating the Bucks and knocking them out of the playoffs. Pacers advance to a Knicks series where they were tested right away. The Knicks go up 2-0 against the Pacers after 2 pretty hard-fought games, especially in game 1. The Pacers had the advantage, and I felt like let that game get out of their hands. And then the Knicks did what the Knicks are supposed to do, took the 2 games at home. And when you're in a 7-game series, you really should take one of those first 2 games because it evens the playing field, because after that, you really have to just count on winning every single home game. You cannot drop games at home if you're the team that gets those second set of home games. So if you are the bottom seed, you can't really afford to let the home team jump out to a 2-0 advantage if you really, really want a chance in that series. And I felt like the Pacers, especially coming into a matchup where I felt like the Knicks had some battle tested guys, even though they were injured, I felt like the Knicks were playing at a level that was magical in and of itself, kind of that run that you dream of as a sports fan. But as time goes on, the Knicks just wore out and got to a point where they were playing injured players and guys couldn't even get up the floor during game 7. So, but the Pacers come in that series, they go down 2-0, they respond at home. And in game 3, really, Andrew Nembhard hits a three-pointer and saves that game because the Knicks were on a run. And I felt like if he doesn't hit that three, that momentum doesn't shift. And now the Knicks are up 3-0, and the Pacers have to win 4 straight, with many of those games being in New York. So again, Pacers responded. They get back to even, right? And then they start that back and forth with New York. They have to go to game 7 to beat the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. After going down 3-2 in that series, Pacers respond with 2 straight wins, get back to Madison Square Garden, and they end up stealing that game and advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. And then against that Boston team that ended up sweeping the Pacers, I still felt like the Pacers were almost the better team for a lot of those halves in that series, but never won a game. I mean, the collapse at the end of the game 1, and then game 2 they were in it again. Didn't have enough steam. Tyrese Halliburton goes out, and then game 3 and 4 had the advantages at home, but ended up dropping those leads as well. So the Pacers have always been right in there, right into the thick of things. Now you flip over to this year's regular season, and they start 10-15. They've got injuries to Aaron Nesmith. James Wiseman goes down. Isaiah Jackson goes down. They lose both of their backup centers. They have to go out and find Thomas Bryant, who's sitting on the bench in Miami. There's so much going on in this Pacers roster. The first 25 games of the season, they start out 10-15. They don't look the same. Tyrese Halliburton looked like he'd just been zapped of all talent. I mean, it looked like he had ballooned all these numbers, and there was some doubt creeping in Pacer Nation that was like, is Tyrese Halliburton really who we think he is, or is this more of like the Tyrese Halliburton that we can expect going forward? Is he going to be able to stay healthy? There were some injury concerns early on in the season with Ty as well. And then all of a sudden, after that Charlotte Hornet game, they respond and they become one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference from that point on. And to say that about a team that was 10-15 to go on and win 50 games, like, that is so impressive to how they started and where they seem to be headed, that they've turned their season completely around. And now I believe look like the best team in the NBA playoffs. If you look at just the numbers alone, they've got the highest winning percentage. They've taken care of business. They're now beating the doors off of a number 1 seed who had a historic season for themselves. And they're making a statement as to why they believe they are title contenders. And there was a lot of conversation before the playoffs. How far can this Pacers team go? They did run into some luck last year with injuries to Giannis, injuries to guys like Mitchell Robinson with the New York Knicks, and they were a banged up team with OG Anunoby and Jalen Brunson. So they didn't really have a healthy squad to play against this Pacers team. And so they struggled to keep up with the Pacers as the series went on and got lucky there. And then the Celtics beat them out in a 4-game sweep. And they thought, well, that probably is right because of just the magical run the Pacers had gone on, maybe some luck thrown in as well. But then they get to this year's postseason, and now they're putting their foot down and stomping on teams' throats and not letting them up off the mat when they put them down. I mean, it's been a resilient bunch ever since last year's playoffs, is the point that I'm getting to. But it also shows you that maybe Kevin Pritchard made a great move in the fact that, like, he kept this team together. I mean, he had multiple opportunities, I think, throughout the offseason and into this regular season and up against the trade deadline, where he could have made some moves. And I think that there were some moves that were offered to them that they considered. But at the end of the day, Pritchard, Chad Buchanan, and company decided, let's run it back with this team, with this cohesiveness, with this connection, with the way that the guys have relationships with one another. Let's see what this team can do one last time before we might have to shake up the roster just a tad to get more to, push us or propel us forward. Well, I don't know how much you can propel this team forward just because of how well they've played in the 2025 NBA playoffs. I've been so impressed with their connectedness, with their ability to come back after adversity. So game 3 against the Milwaukee Bucks, um, it it was not a good game by any stretch. It was a game they looked like they were not ready for. The Bucks came out and did what they were supposed to do in their return back to Milwaukee on their home court. And then in game 4, the Pacers came out and had a very similar game to what we saw in game 4 of this series. So both game 4s have been absolute domination for the Indiana Pacers. And game 4 has always been one of the games that has been deemed the toughest in a series, just because it's that chance for the away team to get back on track, especially if they're down 2-1 in the series or down 3-0. Like, they can make it at least a series by forcing a game 5 and forcing it back to their home floor. And that's what the Celtics did. Or sorry, no, that's what the Cavs did. I'm thinking back to last year. But the Pacers have done this and done it for 2 straight years. I mean, the fact that the Pacers have been able to come back and respond the way that they have makes me think that this team is destined for another Eastern Conference Finals, but also more. I think that this team is, for the first time in my thought process, I do believe that this Indiana Pacers team could win a title this year. I've been hesitant to come out and say that because I wanted to see how this Cavs series played out. And game 4, even though Darius Garland isn't at 100% health and neither is Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, I mean, you go down the list. But there's also some guys dealing with some things on the Pacer side of it too. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton has a back that is usually in flare anyway. He has, you'll see him wearing the heating pad and sitting on that cushion when he's on the bench. Guys are dealing with things at this point in the season. I think the Cavs guys are obviously dealing with more. I think that there's more guys that if you were in a regular season, I think there would be multiple people on this roster that wouldn't be playing. But again, the Pacers have taken the fight to every team that they've faced in the last 2 years, including that Boston series where they didn't really have a fighter's chance, but took the fight anyway. I feel like as we progress further and further into this postseason, we're starting to see the Pacers for who they are, what they mean. They have an identity. And when you talk about the NBA playoffs and you talk about teams that have been successful and you talk about title winning teams, you say the first thing that they did was they established their identity and made sure to impose their will on the teams that they're playing because they understand their identity. And the Indiana Pacers, coming into the postseason, knew what their identity was, and they have not strayed very much at all from what they accomplished throughout the season, throughout the last couple of years. They are a physical team. They are a much improved defensive team, one of the top 10 defenses in the league over the last couple of months. They are a high scoring, high efficient, ball moving juggernaut on offense who are very difficult to defend, who have 8 to 10 ways that they can kill you. It just, everything has come up for these Pacers at the right time, and they have established what they need to do to be thrown into the conversation of a team that contends for a title. They are in the discussions of the good teams like Boston, OKC, Cleveland, and New York. They are, and they have arrived in that conversation. So this is the first time I think I've ever felt this for a Pacers team. I mean, even if you go back to the Paul George era where they went to 2 straight Eastern Conference Finals, I still felt like everything had to go right, and LeBron, something had to happen, right? I felt like something had to happen where, D Wade was dealing with some injury issues, or Chris Bosh was not as effective, or LeBron James at least had a couple games where he made mistakes, but he never did, and they bounced the Pacers 2 years in a row. This year feels different. This team feels different. The coaching feels different. Frank Vogel was a good coach, but I think he relied heavily on the fact that the Pacers were just going to try to beat you up defensively and get physical. This Pacers team feels like they're going to beat you up and be physical defensively. They're going to knock you out offensively. They're going to wear you down. They're going to run you to death. They're going to put 8 to 10 guys on the floor a night. They're going to run with what works for them. They've stuck to their identity. They're not scared of who they are. Everybody on that team knows what their role is. It just, everything has worked out into the Pacers' advantage in each of these series. And now you're seeing it play out live against one of the best teams in the NBA. And it's a lot of fun. So let's get into that actual game, right? The Pacers, just a couple, actually, you know what? Let's get into a couple notes before we get into it. So this is going to be the game 4 recap. We're actually going to do a shorter game 5 preview. There won't be too much to preview in the fact that, like, I think the Pacers are who they are and need to replicate what they did in game 4. Obviously, they're not going to score 80 points. Well, I don't think they will score 80 points and a half. But again, this team surprises you at every turn. But I think there's less and less to talk about as the previews go, just because I think the Pacers have identified what the Cavs are going to throw at them. And I don't know how much more the Cavs have, because once you get to like game 5, the adjustments start to dwindle. Like there aren't as many adjustments that, I mean, there are adjustments obviously that'll still be made, but the feeling out process is done. You know what to expect for the most part from each of these teams. Obviously, offensively, you're not going to get drastically different. Offensively, it's usually defensive adjustments, rebounding. What can we do better to break down defenses? But to adjust completely offensively is just not going to happen. So there's not a lot to talk about as far as the preview, but we'll do a game 5 preview that'll be separate from this episode. So this is the game 4 recap episode. And I want to start by giving you a couple of notes. So when a team when a team goes up 3-1 in a 7-game series, teams advance 96% of the time. That is a 280-13 record for those series. So 280 times that team has advanced. Only 13 times has a team that's been up 3-1 lost that series. Rick Carlisle, most playoff wins in the NBA franchise history for the Indiana Pacers. So Rick passes Larry Bird. Larry had 32 wins in playoff games, and that was number 1 in franchise history. Rick is now at 33. He passed Frank Vogel a couple games ago. Frank had 31. Larry had 32, and now Rick has 33. And this is also back with his time with the team before this run, or these last 2 years, this run with these Pacers. That's incredible. I mean, you talk about a coach that's legendary. I know there was a stigma that followed Rick after he had left Dallas, that younger players didn't really like Rick, and Rick, I guess, supposedly didn't really trust young players or really develop young players in the way that he should have. And there was a lot of that discussion. And, can Rick coach in this new era where it's much more about the player than it is about the system? And you've got a lot more individual performances than you did with a team for performance back in, the 90s and 2000s. Like, what does that look like? And as the game evolved, was Rick's old school kind of methods, was that going to work in today's NBA? And I think he's answered all of those questions, right? And I think you've seen, and I don't want to get too much into the Luka Doncic and that mess that happened in Dallas, but you see what Dallas has now become. I think Rick can get a little bit of an excuse there, just because I do feel like there probably was a wedge driven in between Rick and those Dallas players. There probably was a lack of trust with those younger players, because those younger players didn't really turn out to be too special. I feel like there was a lot that happened with Rick in Dallas, and he comes to this Indiana team, and the front office right away says, "What do you want? What do we need? How can we get this done to make it happen, to bring you back to Indianapolis? Who is going to be that cornerstone?" And if you read there was a article that was put out by Miles Turner in the Players Tribune. If you haven't read it yet, it's an incredible read. especially as a Pacers fan, because you get a respect for Miles. I mean, I've always respected Miles. I've loved Miles. I've said that for forever. Miles needs to be a Pacer for life. So whatever needs to get done this summer, you do it just to bring Miles, because he is the heartbeat of this team. As much as Tyrese is a heartbeat of this team, as well as Pascal, I think the true Indiana Pacer, if I say Pacers and you think about this era, you think about Miles Turner as number one. I mean, he has been the guy. He's been the glue. He's been the solid rock that we've needed for years, and he's provided that. And I think there's always been some criticism and critiques around his game, but I think if you're a real Pacers fan and a real basketball fan, I think you understand the importance of Miles Turner, not only to this city and this franchise and this organization, but on the court, but also off the court. The guy's a tremendous person, and his vulnerability, just talking about the mental health of being in trade deals all the time and constantly think he's being traded, and the Pacers throw a bunch of money at DeAndre Ayton, and DeAndre Ayton ends up signing a contract back with the team, and so he ends up with Phoenix, and the Pacers, I think, luck out that they matched the offer from the Pacers. So Indiana has to, keep Miles Turner. I think that was the closest they ever got to trading Miles Turner, is the fact that they went out and threw a bunch of money at DeAndre Ayton, and it didn't work out, which luckily it didn't. And Miles Turner is here to stay, and I think he's going to be a Pacer for life. He talked about how much he loves the city in that article. But one of the biggest things that he talks about is his relationship with Rick Carlisle, which they went over this last postseason too. But Miles went into even more depth and talked about his relationship, and talked about in the first couple of weeks where Rick became the head coach for the Pacers, because he knows he lives in the Dallas area. Rick, also living in the Dallas area, contacted Miles Turner, and he said, "Let's meet up. Let's have lunch and or dinner, and we'll do some practice stuff too." So he went with Rick, and they did some practicing in a gym somewhere, just to kind of get a feel of what Miles Turner game was like. And Rick wanted to see it firsthand. But more about it was he wanted to, Miles is the first one he reaches out to as far as the players are concerned, and he wanted to pick Miles Turner's brain. And Miles, same thing with Rick, and he knew that Rick was different, right? Rick, as the guys called him last night, he's a savant in basketball. Miles alludes to the fact that Rick talked about things that were even over his head, as somebody that played basketball, who lives and breathes basketball. Miles said at times you just feel like you're swimming upstream against the things that he's trying to tell you, because you're baffled by some of the things he comes up with, but you're so lost because it's such at a high level that you're not even really thinking about what he said and how deep it is. And Rick has an incredible basketball mind, and he's able to think about things that not many people in the whole world can think about when it comes to the game. So, long-winded to say, Miles Turner trusts Rick Carlisle, and that was the biggest step for the Indiana Pacers going forward, because that is your guy. Miles Turner is the Pacers. He embodies what a Pacer is. And so he gains that trust of Miles Turner. And from then on out, when younger guys come into the team, when veterans step into the team who know Miles Turner, who respect Miles Turner's game, look to Miles to not only lead by example, but look to Miles and Rick's relationship, and they start to catch on to how Miles and Rick interacted. And then these younger guys that are brought over, like Neesmith and Nemhard's drafted, and Shepard's drafted, and Tyrese is moved for, and Pascal's brought in, and TJ McConnell was around with Miles and his relationship with Rick. And then Obi Toppin comes in, and that confidence there with Rick, it goes to show you just how much he cares. And Tyrese Halliburton spoke about it too in this post-game conference, where he talked about the fact that these film sessions after losses are some of the toughest moments he's ever been in basketball. But it's because Rick cares so much, not only about the team and the team's ability to win and be successful. What Rick really wants to see is just your growth. And for you to have fun, Rick knows it means you've got to buckle down and make those adjustments, but just play your game. And I think that's been the biggest thing with Carlisle being the Pacers head coach, is that he stepped in and he's not tried to really dictate. I mean, obviously he brings over his system, but he's not trying to dictate what these players do. He's letting the players do what they're good at. And then Rick has evolved his system to make it fit the personnel that is in Indianapolis. And I think that only works when you've got tough-minded guys who can take criticism, who can understand that he's not trying to make you mad. He's not trying to get on you about things. He's not trying to ride you. He's trying to get the best out of his players and the best out of the humans that they are. And that's why I think the way that they constructed this roster has been so important. Adding guys like James Johnson, TJ McConnell, um, even Thomas Bryant at points. I mean, just guys that are professionals and work hard and that work. I mean, you look up and down this roster, there is not one person on this roster that doesn't give 100% effort. Every single guy, pretty much all the time, gives 100%. And obviously, you're going to have those moments where they don't. But for the most part, you're going to get 100%, 110% in most of these games. And that's been the biggest thing. That's why Rick Carlisle is now the number one in playoff wins in Pacer franchise history, which is, I mean, just incredible with the two coaches that he's now passed. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about Rick. If you haven't read that Players Tribune article by Miles Turner, I highly recommend doing so because it gives you a lot of insight on his battle with mental health and his, this want for Miles to always be in trade discussions from the national media, but the Pacers really had no interest in getting rid of Miles Turner. They trust Miles Turner. They love Miles Turner as a person and as a player on this roster. So hopefully they can get that deal done because we could build statues and put Miles' jersey up in the rafters at some point. Let's get into the actual game itself. We're not going to talk about really play-by-play. We're going to talk about certain instances and numbers that I want to bring up just because if we did that where we went play-by-play or like quarter-by-quarter and kind of broke down what happened in the game, we'd go, 3 hours because of just how much happened with the Pacers and the intensity and all that stuff. So we'll get into some key moments here. I want to start by saying the Pacers came out after getting beat down by 22 points in game 3. Watch game 3, the biggest adjustment that needed to happen from game 3 to game 4. They had to figure out that 3-2 zone. It's an interesting 3-2 zone and one that I don't believe that many personnel would be able to play this zone, but because of how good defensively Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley are, the Cavs can get away with it because they can spearhead that 3-2 zone with Evan Mobley. You'd never really see a big, especially somebody that's that high. I think Evan Mobley, actually, I want to look this up. I don't want to get it wrong, but I think he's 6'11". I want to check, though. Evan Mobley height. I believe he's 6'11". I mean, he's 7 foot. Okay. So he's 7 foot. Well, some people have him as 6'11". He says 7 foot. And I think that wingspan's over 7 foot at that point. I mean, the guy's got incredibly long arms. He's a very difficult person to get around, especially because he does move pretty well for a big. I don't think he moves as well against the guards as Jarrett Allen does, but I do believe he can keep up for the most part with a guard, especially in a zone, because you're not really relying on having to keep up with somebody. You're just trying to force them one direction, especially at the top of that zone. His job is to try to force the ball handler or the ball away from the basket towards, usually the left side. If you're talking about Tyrese Halliburton, they're trying to get that offense to go to the left because Ty is not as comfortable there. But they break into this zone in game 3, and I think it was like over 90% of the time at some points throughout that game, and the Pacers just had no answer. But the thing about it was the Pacers just weren't hitting shots to start the second quarter. I mean, that zone really stymied the offense in that second quarter. I thought the Pacers played okay in the other quarters. The first quarter, they came back after being down by, I think it was 18 or 19. They come all the way back. They tie it up at the end of the first quarter, and then the Cavs go on their run to open the second quarter, and then that's when that zone just ate the Pacers alive. And knowing the Pacers, obviously I was frustrated with game 3 because, I mean, now you look at it, if they win game 3 and now they come out here and bust the Cavs, it's a sweep. But they're the number 1 seed. I didn't really expect this to be a sweep, even with guys hurt. I felt like the Cavs would at least get 1 or 2. I still felt like it would be a 6-game series. I still believe it could be very well a 6 game. I think game 5 will be very, very difficult to win. I think the Cavs will come out with desperation. The Pacers, while have been good about answering adversity, I think sometimes they let their foot off the gas. So I actually got leaning more towards Cavs, but we'll talk about that maybe in the game 5 preview. But I do. I feel like the Pacers came out and understood that their success in game 4 was going to hinge on the fact that they needed to be able to figure out that zone. And if they were hitting shots, they were going to have enough in their adjustments to beat the Cavs at home. Because again, this team is very difficult. I think they're 10-1 now with Tyrese Halliburton in the lineup and playing at home at Gamebridge in the last 2 years. They've only lost the one game against the Cavs this season at home. So when you look at what the Pacers adjustments had to be, it was going against that zone, but also matching that intensity. And boy, did they! They came out in that opening quarter, and they were up by 15 after the end of the first quarter. By the end of the second quarter, the Pacers' lead had hit 41 points, tying the largest halftime lead in NBA history, playoff history. The Pacers scored 80 first half points, setting a new franchise record for the amount of points scored in a half. The Cavs had no answer in the first half. In fact, they were basically on mute because they didn't answer at all, really. They had 8 field goals in the first half in total. The Cavs were 8 of 32. They shot 25%. They were 5 of 19 from the three-point arc. So had they not at least hit a couple of those three-pointers, and had they not gotten 20 free throw attempts, you're talking about this half could have been like 80-20. I mean, that's how bad Cleveland was in the first half. And I'm talking about they didn't have any flow. None. It just looked like the Pacers were just out there playing against a middle school team. And no offense against the good middle schooler teams out there, but the Pacers just handled the Cavs. And a lot of that was because Donovan Mitchell really struggled in the first half. He's 3 of 11. He was 1 of 5 from 3. And we'll talk about Donovan Mitchell. He did go 5 of 6 from the free throw line. And a lot of the Cavs got to the free throw line in that first half. And was one of the things that Rick talked about after the game as being something they've got to clean up. But I mean, again, the Cavs hit 18 free throws out of the 20 they had attempted in that first half. Had they not gotten to the line that much, even cut that in half, you do wonder how crazy this score. I mean, it very well could have been the Cavs in the 20s and the Pacers. And again, you always play that game of like, well, if they take 10 points away, the Pacers would have outscored them 80 to like 20 something. But then you also have to think about, like, obviously that's not necessarily how that would have gone, but it is fun to think about the fact that had the Cavs shot half those free throws, there's probably a good chance that the Pacers lead that game or go into half with like a 50-point lead. That's how good the Pacers were, and that's how bad Cleveland was. They had 14 turnovers in the first half. The Cavs did. The Pacers had 4. And again, we talked about this being the key to the series. The Pacers are a very good team when they hang on to the ball. And I'm talking about, like, this is a regular thing for the Pacers to be able to keep and limit their turnovers under 10. They went on a stretch this season. I think they were one of the first teams in history to go, like, I think it was 4 or 5 games without a turnover or something like or turnover in the second, something like that. It was like a crazy stat where the Pacers had like 1 or 2 turnovers in a game over a stretch of, per game, over a stretch of like 5 games. Like, never turned the ball over. So, I mean, you're talking about a team that really knows how to take care of the ball, but they hadn't taken care of the ball in Cleveland. They'd really struggled, but still won those 2 games. I think they were 18 and 17 on turnovers in those 2 games, the first 2 games. And then in game 3, they really lacked the ability to hang on to the basketball. I mean, again, I think we take for granted just how good Tyrese Halliburton is with the basketball. It's not typical that a point guard does what he does and only gets 1 to 2 turnovers a game, maybe 3 or 4 if he's really struggling. But if you look at game 3, the Pacers had, was that 27? No, that's fouls. They had 10 turnovers in game 3. So Oh, no, that's not right. That's game 4. Hold on, let me check. That's game 4. I'm looking at the wrong thing. They had more than that. I think it was closer to 17 or 18 in game 3. Should have had this pulled up. Game 3. Turnovers. 13. So not like worse than what they did. And actually, Cleveland had 14 in game 3. It wasn't worse than what they did in Cleveland, but it's still not good for this team because of how good they are with holding on to the ball. But, I mean, this Pacers team just from top to bottom, they just don't turn the ball over much. And that's amazing to think that you've got a team that can limit their turnovers to 4 or 5 a game. You don't really see that in the NBA a whole lot, especially in the playoffs. But yeah, Pacers come out and beat the doors off the Cavs. And then in the second half, it was just keeping the Cavs at a arm's length of 30 some points, which it ended up being a 20-point win for the Pacers. And actually the second half, the Cavs were at least better offensively. But again, I think the Pacers were just playing with the fact that let's not get hurt. Our intensity is not going to be able to match what we did in the first half because it doesn't really need to match that. The Cavs would have had to come out and hit every shot, I think, to get back into this game. So once they started missing a few, they're like, they'll never get back in this game. And then, I mean, for the fourth quarter, I think it was the bench played the whole 12 or the whole 12. I think Andrew Nemhard and TJ played some in that second or in that fourth quarter. But yeah, I mean, by the end of the half, everybody was, I mean, even the TNT crew was like, all right, this is over. this is done. We can start. I mean, you had people recording podcasts tonight and they were just like, yeah, this is done. Over, game's wrapped up. Don't have to worry about it. So what a wild first half, because I want to read you some stats from tonight. 39 points for the Cavs in the first half, 25% field goal percentage, 5 of 19 3-point field goal. I don't know what the percentage. I think it's 20 something. 6 points in the paint for the Cavs in the first half in game 4 tonight. 5 points off of turnovers. Pacers in the game tonight, the first half, 80 points, 60% from the field, 12 of 18 from 3, 30-point paint points, and 23 points off of turnovers. 14 turnovers will do that to you. If you're going to turn the ball over that much. And that's where if I'm a Cavs fan, if I'm somebody on the Cavs staff, even in the Cavs roster, like that's a major concern for me going forward too. Because something happens at the beginning of the second half that we'll talk about now, because it'll play a huge part in the series going forward. But first, I wanted to just talk about the Cavs they ended with 22 turnovers in that game, and 14 of those came in the first half when the Pacers just blew them out. Pacers had 25 assists in the first half, which I believe set a record. Yeah, that's the most assists in any half of a playoff game. Yeah, when you score 8 field goals compared to the Pacers 30, that's going to keep you out of a lot of games. I mean, they were atrocious, the Cavs. And it's not going to get much better if the injury to Donovan Mitchell has an impact on game 5. So at the beginning of the second half, Donovan Mitchell goes out. He's taking his warm-ups. He goes up to shoot a 3, and he doesn't even get up off the ground. He kind of gets up on his tippy toes, and he's like, that doesn't feel right. And he grabs his left ankle, which he's been dealing with left calf issues and has been for the last couple of years. It's been something that's been a constant bother for him. And calf injuries are very concerning because a lot of time calf injuries end in Achilles injuries, and Achilles injuries are, devastating to especially quick guards or guys that are on the older side, which Donovan Mitchell is on the older side of an NBA player. And so there's concern there, right? So when he goes down to grab his ankle, I don't know if it was like a response to something that happened earlier in the game where he sprained his ankle, and he didn't leave the game tonight with a boot or anything. Like media has now said that he's walking around without a boot, but and they've seen him in the locker room, and he said he's fine, that he's going to be good to go on Tuesday, and we'll see what happens after tonight, like as we get more and more from the media, because they're meeting now. But they said he's going to be fine for game 5 on Tuesday. But if you're a Cavs fan, I mean, he didn't play the second half. He's hobbled. He's been hobbled with that calf. Like even I think it was game 2 when he went down with Aaron Nesmith after he tried to stop Nesmith from getting that putback dunk on that free throw. Ever since then, you could tell he's been laboring on that leg. So he's not 100% healthy. And this team needs a 100% healthy Donovan Mitchell to come back in this series. So, I mean, that's where I draw the line of like the Pacers win this series now, because Donovan Mitchell is not healthy either. So now you've got Donovan Mitchell not healthy. Darius Garland isn't healthy. Evan Mobley isn't 100%. DeAndre Hunter isn't 100%. And then you've got everything else that's going on with other guys that's not really talked about. And who knows what that is. So this Pacer team, again, knock on wood, has been relatively healthy, right? I mean, obviously, Mathurin had that bruised like abdomen area in game like 3, I think it was, against the Bucks, against Giannis, or game 4. No, it was game 4, I think. Yeah, game 4. And then, Ty's always dealing with things, but then he hurts his wrist. So, but that didn't really seem to plague him too much in the last 2 games. So, Pacers have been pretty good about, staying healthy. But I think one thing that helps with them is because they've been able to play 10 guys all season, 11 guys all season, Pacers always come in fresh to these situations, where the Cavs, I mean, they've been playing, the same kind of depth, but not to the extent, I think, of the Pacers, and especially in the playoffs. The Cavs have shortened a lot of their rotation. I mean, they're really trying to rely on 3 guys off that bench, maybe 4, and Isaac Okoro. But Isaac Okoro and Sam Merrill, I mean, they've at times looked like they've not even existed. In game 4, DeAndre Hunter was just awful. Oh, we should probably talk about Benedict Mathurin. Speaking of, I'm 47 minutes into this podcast and we haven't even talked about the skirmish. So let's talk about the physicality, right? Physicality, and it was on my rundown. I just completely skipped over it. But the physicality, and I think because I wanted it, I probably should have put this towards the bottom, just because there wasn't a ton to really talk about after the first half of this game. I mean, the Pacers hit their threes. They got great contributions from their bench. Once again, Toppin and McConnell, excellent. Ben Shepherd, really good in this game too, which is a very encouraging sign. But the Pacers were without probably their best scoring option off the bench after he played only 1 minute and 20 seconds. He checks in with like 5:40 something left in the first quarter. And by the 4:20 mark in the first quarter, he's thrown out of the game. The altercation happens when, I don't know what happened. Like the ball got knocked out of bounds, and I don't know if anything was really said beforehand. This was just from the skirmish. So Benedict Mathurin blocked DeAndre Hunter, and that's when DeAndre Hunter dislocated his finger on his shooting hand. And then in game 3, Mathurin goes up for a ball, and DeAndre Hunter kind of gets underneath his legs. And Mathurin didn't fall down or anything like that, but it did catch him kind of off balance. Like, what are you doing? Like that seemed dirty. So Mathurin said something to Hunter, and then both of them get teed up because they only exchanged words in game 3. Like, it wasn't like it was a dust up or anything. They were just talking, and then they kind of separate, and then the ref hits both of them with technicals, and they're both kind of like, what? We were just chatting. But then in game 4, Mathurin comes in for Nesmith, and again, right around that 4-minute mark, he says something to Hunter, and then it looked like initially it looked like he put a closed fist into, not hard though, as almost like just a push off him to go get a ball as they were inbounding. He kind of pushed off him with the fist. So it did, it was a punch, it looked like, but not like he wound up and hit him. He just stuck his arm out and shoved off of him with his closed fist. But then I think where it caught Hunter, it's in that sternum area where like that's a sensitive area right there. So if you hit somebody right there, it does kind of knock the wind out of them a little bit, but it is a little bit alarming. And so Hunter kind of like doubles over a little bit, and then he stands back up quickly. Not stands back up, but he like comes up real quick. And then he starts like wagging his finger at Matherin. And Matherin's like all the way at almost the hash mark and like standing with his arms like, what's happening? Like, what are you talking about? And supposedly DeAndre Hunter didn't say anything. He just was like, no, wagging his finger at him like, how dare you? And he was like pointing at him like, I'm going to come over there and get you. And he does. Matherin has his arms out, straight out. And DeAndre Hunter two-handed just shoves Benedict Matherin to the floor. And then Miles Turner turns and sees Matherin on the ground, and he knows that Hunter pushed him. So he like Turner flies over and just like he like almost body checks him and knocks Hunter backwards. And then the team gets involved, security gets involved, and they separate him. And then Matherin and Hunter are chirping back and forth, going back to their respective huddles because they're going to review it for unnecessary actions and non-basketball plays. Well, when you look at it, it does look like Benedict Matherin he does make contact. You can't tell though, because it was blurry. You couldn't really tell if it was a closed fist or open fist, whatever it might be, but they deemed it unnecessary. And then obviously the Hunter thing was unnecessary, how he responded. Usually you get the second guy, right? But they're going to review this in the playoffs. Well, I tweeted, DeAndre Hunter's gone. You can't just two-hand shove somebody to the floor. Even if you're responding to something, they're going to throw you out of the game. I thought, well, maybe they could throw both of them out of the game and then it's even. Like, that's a message to both teams, like, no, knock that off. You're both gone, which I thought was actually pretty likely as time started to go on. I didn't expect the result, what came out of it. They come out of the thing. They talk on their little microphone to the rest of the arena. They say, there's a technical foul on Turner. There's a technical foul on DeAndre Hunter. And there's a flagrant 2 on Benedict Matherin for a punch to the chest. And they throw Benedict Matherin out of the game. But Hunter stays and Turner stays. And I've never heard the Pacer fans that mad. Because as they continue to show more and more replay, the consensus, I think, was throw them both out. If you're going to throw somebody out, throw them both out, because both of them weren't necessary plays. They were non-basketball plays. Throw them both out. If you're going to give them both a consequence, flagrant 2, both of them, see you later. We'll see you next game. But they didn't throw DeAndre Hunter out. They said Benedict Matherin punched him. And now, if you look at a very close-up still of the Benedict Matherin push-off, it looks like he has a hand and not a fist, and he shoved DeAndre Hunter off, which is a basketball play. It is. You can use your hand to push off somebody. Depending on the force, yes, could you get called for an offensive foul? Of course. But it wasn't like it was a wind-up and you like punched him. It was just a shove. And it is a open hand. You can see it. You can zoom in on it now. The Cavs fans are like, "Oh no, he punched him. You can see it." No, it's 100%. They've got a still of it. Where I'm interested to see what happens with. I think they'll obviously release something on it eventually. I'm interested to see what they say, what the NBA says. They'll probably back the refs, but also I could see them saying, while we agree with the Benedict Matherin ejection, DeAndre Hunter should have also been thrown out. I don't know what the rules are as far as what the league can now do. I don't know if there's like, could they suspend Hunter? I don't know. Could they give him a retroactive technical? I have no idea what they can actually do, but it will be interesting to see how the league responds, because I think they got that one wrong. And I thought at that moment, that was a big, big moment, because the score at the time, it was, let me check real quick just to make sure I know when it was, or it's hard to see. Oh, there we go. That's where, okay. I'm just trying to see like where because on the play-by-play on the NBA thing, it's like weird the way it's set up. Let's see what the score was. So here's where he's thrown out. All right. So it was 22-10. So it was only a 12-point lead when Matherin gets thrown out. But the Cavs they're a good team. I felt like, all right, they're only down 12. All they need is a good run, and they're right back in this game. And now we're without our best bench scoring option, and who's been the best player in the last 2 games, and Benedict Mathurin. That's not good. That's really not good because now they're going to be scrambling trying to find some scoring off the bench, and I'm not sure. Toppin hadn't really had a good series up until that point scoring the basketball, and McConnell has. But like, was that going to be enough to keep the Cavs out? And I felt like that could also swing momentum back to the Cavs. The Cavs could come out angry. Well, that was not the case. And actually, Kenny Atkinson and most of the Cavs talked about this. And this is where it gets real weird for me if I'm a Cavs fan too. Like if I was a Cavs fan, this is where I would be like, yeah, that's concerning. So the reason why physicality comes up and is a talking point on this episode, and this kind of leads into the end of the episode because we're going to talk about how the Cavs have reacted to this and how the Pacers reacted to that. So the Cavs, Darius Garland and Evan Mobley were talking in their press game conference. And these are some of the quotes that come from tonight because I find them very interesting. So Kenny Atkinson tonight, and so they've already probably left Indy at this point, or like are getting ready to leave Indy at this point, because this was a really short press conference, so they're already done. Kenny Atkinson in tonight's press conference, it's kind of the story in every facet, talking about the physicality. It wasn't like tactics or anything. They just dominated us in every facet of the game. And he was alluding to the domination by the Pacers, the first half by the Pacers, and he was talking about the physicality. Rewind to game 2, right before game 2, when all these guys are hurt. He said that the Pacers aren't a dirty team, but he thought that the physicality line was not established by the ref and that the Pacers were allowed to be more physical with the Cavs. But he wasn't blaming the Pacers or Rick Carlisle being dirty. And then in game 3, same thing. Complains about, or sorry, not game 3. After game 2, when the Cavs lost in game 2, same thing. Complained about the physicality, complained that the Pacers were able to grab their guys like on the inbound plays that they had horrible inbound plays all game. And they said that it was because the Pacers were holding them and being too physical with them. And there were some things in game 2 where he felt like they were way too physical. And then after game 3, when Obi Toppin kind of gives a shove to Donovan Mitchell, he's like, oh, that's just how the Pacers are playing. They're playing it more physical, and that still he thought that the league was not doing a good job, and the refs and the officials pretty much weren't doing a good job of keeping that balance and that physicality to a level that was playable or played through. So it's been constant Kenny Atkinson talking about the physicality and blaming the physicality on reasons why they weren't winning. For a coach of the year, it was very weak stuff. I mean, let's just be honest, point blank, like the stuff that Kenny Atkinson has said in this series, you really question the mentality of Kenny Atkinson in these moments. And to push blame off on that kind of stuff, like you're really searching. Just say your team's not playing well and matching that physicality. Like, that's all you got to say. Not the fact that the Pacers are getting away with it. They're being more physical. I'm not calling them dirty, but they're way more physical, and actually too physical, over the line physical. So he basically is being hypocritical. He is calling the Pacers dirty. He's not saying they're dirty, but he's saying they're dirty by alluding to the fact that the Pacers are being way more physical and crossing the line at times. So you're saying it. Might as well come out and say it, right? The Pacers don't like that. And, Kenny Atkins is talking about all these plays that he's submitting to the league for review. And Carlisle's like, if we did that, then, every team does that. Come on. Like, we're not new to this. But it's gotten to the point now where Carlisle's like, dude, like, let's just play basketball. Stop complaining. Right. It's a physical game. And Carlisle points to the fact that, like, you've outshot us at the free throw line by like 40 in this series. So that's not a favorable. So that's not a complaint that's valid, because if that was a complaint you had, then yeah, sure. Like, you could make the argument that the Pacers are not getting the fair whistle. But Carlisle's like, that just doesn't make sense, because he's getting to the free throw line. These guys are getting to the free throw line. He's complaining because the Pacers they've taken that fight to the Cavs, and the Cavs do not like it. They don't like the physicality. They're not as physical as the Pacers. They don't have guys that can get as physical as the Pacers can. And this has been a critique from the Cavaliers side for years, is this team lacking that toughness? Not that the guys are weak. but lacking the fact that they just don't like to be physical. And there are players that don't like to be physical. It's not part of their game. And if you look at it, I think their toughest player is Max Strus. I think their most physical guy, him and Isaac Okoro. I think both of them will get physical with you, but to an extent, they don't want to, right? I don't think Max Strus really wants to play the physical game because I mean, he at one point he kind of shoves Tyre. He does some. He's taken some weird shots at players. Like you want to talk about not necessarily dirty, but really unneeded. There was one game in or moment in game 3, like he seeks out Andrew Nemhard like right at half court, and he like shoves Andrew Nemhard for no reason. He's like, and then he goes back towards the other side of the court where he'd come from. Like it was like, okay, what was that for? That's when Nemhard goes over and shoves him. Like, what are you doing? Like that's weird. Like you're running down the court with me, and I don't know. So then Max Strus tried to mess with Tyrese on the 3. He kind of gets tangled up after Tyrese hits a 3, and Tyrese kind of like throws Max's hand off of him, and then Max, he didn't do anything malicious or anything, but he kind of like he tried to bump into Tyrese again, and Tyrese Reggie'd it and like threw his hands up and went flying backwards, and they call an offensive foul, and then that's when the Pacers start like their 19-2 run to end the half. But again, the physicality of this game, the Pacers just are. They're the more physical team, and you got to be the more physical team in the playoffs. They're not dirty. They're not doing anything that's dirty. The Mathurin block, people will point to that one and say that was dirty. That wasn't dirty. It was a very competitive play where he tried to block it, and unfortunately, it ends in an injury. Should Mathurin have gone up for the block? Maybe not. Is it at a risk for either of them to get hurt? Yeah, probably. Like it was a play that both of them could have gotten hurt on because you don't typically see guys like that athletic go up after a block. And I mean, almost got the block. I mean, they didn't call it a foul, but I mean, I think he did foul him because he kind of pushes him off with his offhand. But I mean, you're talking about almost just a completely clean block if you're not looking at the review. So yeah, the Kenny Atkinson again complaining about it. But the one thing I really want to talk about, I just had listened to them talk about this on the Cavs podcast, and then tonight in this quote, right? So I've not had a chance to really watch it. I've watched it without. I've had it on the screen over here, and they look dejected. These two, Mobley and Garland. But I guess one of the quotes was, I don't know if I can find it. Basically, one of the questions was the Pacers came out more aggressive and more physical with more intensity in this game. How do you and I think it was Danny from Locked On Cavs. And he asked Garland, what's the deal with you not being able to match the Pacers physicality? Garland pauses for like 15 seconds before he answers it. And then he goes, I don't know. You can tell I don't know if it's because the game was just over by halftime and he's trying to like figure out, because he'd asked what point did you really start to notice that the Pacers physicality was at a whole different level? And it was basically like this response of Garland sitting there, like leaning back. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. And so obviously the Pacers people on Twitter are like, yeah, Garland's answer to this. Wait till you hear it. So I'm interested to see like actually hear it, because I'm seeing the closed captions on the video, but it's just answers like that. And this has been the whole series where they've asked the Cavs, like, what's the deal? How are the Pacers winning? And they're like, oh, they're more physical. That's not good if you're the Cavs, because to be honest with you, there maybe is one or two plays where the Pacers maybe have gone a little bit overboard, but the Cavs have also done that where they've almost, they're tackling Mathurin in game 3 and they're, wrapping up Obi Toppin around the head. And, there's been times where the Cavs have done things that have borderline not been basketball plays. So the fact that like we're pretty even on that, but we're not even on free throws, we're not even on fouls, like it's just absurd that the Cavs are pointing to the Pacers and be like, oh, they're just trying to hurt people. They're not these guys. And especially if you look at their careers, like nobody on this team has ever hurt anybody, especially on purpose. Like it's just stupid. There's no other way to put it and not put it honestly, and just say it's dumb. Like the fact that they are trying to make excuses to weather whatever storm is coming for Cleveland in the summer. Because even the Cavs get past the Pacers, this team is still, I think, I think are not as tough as the teams remaining. I can make a case where every team left is tougher than this Cavs team. They're just more physical. They're more, I don't know, hungry. Whereas I think this Cavs team really benefited from just kind of skating through the season, and now they're matched with intensity, and it's caused them problems. Whereas in the regular season, you're not seeing this high intensity usually. Every once in a while, you will, and in games like that, they've done okay in. Like the Cavs have done okay against the top teams of the league. But I think once you get into the playoffs, you're really tested. You're really you have to show just how physical you can be, how much of a force you can be. And they again, that was all that was used tonight. Like Rick Carlisle and Kenny Atkinson. Sorry, I got knocked out. But I think the Cavs, for the most part, have been just a weaker team. You could go through and talk about each of the teams and talk about why they're tougher than what the Cavs are. And I just think that's personnel. I mean, Donovan Mitchell is very tough, tough-minded, high intensity, has always been, is a killer. But you really do start to question sometimes with some of these other guys, right? And I'm not even talking about injuries and playing through injuries and stuff like that. I'm talking about they just seemed like they got punched in this game and didn't respond. Oh, here's another fun one. Darius Garland. This is good. So supposedly Darius Garland, they asked him about intensity, like in that same quote, and he said that he was impressed with the team's performance tonight and the way that they were able to respond to some of these things. So what? Like what exactly are you impressed by? Because this was embarrassing. If you're a Cavs player, this was embarrassing. So what was there tonight? I can't think of one thing. The only thing I can think of, and he says it, is that he was happy that DeAndre Hunter didn't just let Benedict Mathurin do what he did. That's not what we mean. Like, he's talking about actually physical force, like fighting. Even though it wasn't like a fight, it was a shove. But he's talking about the fact that like he loved the intensity that DeAndre Hunter showed in that shove against Benedict Mathurin. That's when you look at a player and go, you just don't get it, do you? Like you just don't understand what we mean by physicality. He goes on to say that he was happy with the way Cavs were physical tonight. You can't make this stuff up. I can't wait to watch the video. If you were a Cavs fan, I just don't know where you could go from here and be positive about this team that they've constructed. And he's Darius Garland's constantly. I mean, it sucks because he's always been somebody that's shown up on injury reports, and injuries have kind of plagued his career so far. And just unfortunate, like he broke his jaw last year. Like it's awful. You never want guys to get hurt, but I think you also have to. That's what I always find interesting in sports, especially when they talk about the Pacers. This is always a point I don't really bring up because people think of it as like, oh, well, you're rooting for injury. No, that's not it at all. And you're trying to defend the Pacers by saying that like they can beat anybody. But the thing is if you have players that are hurt, usually that's a question mark for a roster. That's a decision that the front office needs to make. If somebody's always hurt, maybe it's time to part ways, right? I mean, this Cavs team has just not ever been healthy in the playoffs ever since LeBron left. And even then you had injuries. So again, this Cavs team, they built a good team. They had a historic season. This is a good team still. They could still win this series. But if I'm a Cavs fan, yeah, like I think the narratives exist because there is usually some fact to it, right? There is this narrative that exists that the Cavs mentally and physically are just not as tough as their opponents. Could you see that? Yeah, like in game 4, game 4, you saw it. The Pacers came out and smacked them, and they looked completely dazed. I mean, they looked like they didn't know where they were, what they were doing, how they were going to score again ever. It was a disaster. So yeah, like if I'm a Cavs fan, yeah, I'd be questioning that, right? How tough are you? Can you respond? Because toughness is about how you respond most of the time. It's not always about how you act in the moment. Toughness is more about how do you get up after being punched, right? So I think it's warranted. But the fact that Darius Garland, I mean, maybe don't let him talk during the post game stuff because some of the stuff he says, it's like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. If you're impressed with anything that went on tonight and you're a Cleveland player, maybe you should get more of a reality check. So I'm kind of on my soapbox for Cleveland fans here. But yeah, last night's game, just complete domination by a Pacers team that just looks so much better than them than the Cavs. And they finally get their somewhat healthy starters all on the same in the game. They win a great game 3. I mean, a great response, but then who has the last laugh? The Pacers. So we'll see what happens. Just a couple more things to kind of share that are fun after this beatdown that happened tonight. At the end of the first half, Aaron Nesmith had a plus 26 plus minus. Pascal Siakam 36, Miles Turner 31, Tyrese Halliburton 33, Nembhard 29, Toppin 11, McConnell 14, Ben Shepherd 16, Benedict Mathurin 5 plus 5. So a guy that played 120 minutes or a minute and 20 seconds, he ended up with a positive plus minus. Thomas Bryant 4. I mean, that's insane. Looking at the box score for the game, how did the guys do? You can highlight Pascal Siakam, who had 21 points on 9 of 10 shooting. He was an absolute difference maker against that zone. He took advantage of a Max Strus trying to guard him in the post, and Max Strus had no answer. The Pacers started the game against that zone. I think the Cavs went to it right away. Like 90 seconds into the game, the Cavs deployed that zone for the next like 5 or 6 possessions. And the Pacers to start against the zone went 4 of 4, 3 3-pointers, and a field goal, which I think was Pascal Siakam's post up against Max Strus. So the Pacers absolutely destroyed that zone that caused them so many problems. And then after that, because the Cavs won game 3, I don't really think they made too many adjustments. That maybe offensively some, but the Cavs defense just stymied the Pacers in game 3. So there wasn't really much except the fact that they were like, all right, let's, we'll change a little bit of the coverage on the zone to give them a little bit of a different look. But the Pacers just bashed in the zone. And then I think that just destroyed the Cavs game plan from there because they were going to rely on that zone to slow the Pacers down. And it just didn't. And then the Pacers played with a defensive intensity that we haven't seen. The Pacers defense in game 4 was just, masterclass from the Pacers in that defensive side and in the offensive side. But yeah, Pascal 9 of 10, 90% from the field, 6 boards. Miles Turner 20 points. He was 4 of 4 from the 3-point line, 7 of 13. He shot 53% tonight from the field. He had 7 rebounds. Nembhard had 7 assists, 7 points, a plus 22 rating for the game. Tyrese had just 11 points. He had 5 assists, but he also had 5 boards. He's been rebounding the basketball really well. And he only had 2 turnovers, but he only played 26 minutes. He didn't shoot it too well. He's 3 of 8. Obi Toppin was a big difference maker when Pascal got into early foul trouble in that first quarter. Toppin had 20 points. He had 5 rebounds. He had one of the best layups I've ever seen. He went underneath the basket, driving on the baseline, and looked like he was running out of real estate, and then somehow just kept floating. And Dr. J'd it. 9 of 14 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3. TJ McConnell had 13 points. He was a plus 9. He had 8 assists. He was breaking down that zone at will. He was excellent. Ben Shepherd played really well, I thought. Maybe not as much defensively as I would have liked, but offensively, Ben looks to be turning a corner, which is huge going forward. 14 points. He was 5 of 10 from the field, 2 of 6 from 3-point land. And he was a difference maker on the offensive end. He had some pretty big shots. We even got to see James Johnson. He made a field goal. And James played 7 minutes, 37 seconds. Furphy played 10 minutes. Jarris Walker got 13 minutes. Ben played almost 30 minutes because of Matherin's exit. But yeah, the Pacers, again, just took it to the Cavs, beat them in game 4, forcing a 3-1 deficit. And the Pacers will go back to Cleveland Tuesday night, again, May 13th. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN. I think my final takeaway is if the Pacers continue to play at this intensity, at this level, with this much focus, they are a top team and are going to be very difficult for anyone to beat. And a 3-1 lead could very well turn into their second trip to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2 years, where they'll await the winner of the Boston and New York Knicks series, which is at 2-1. The Knicks have that advantage. They play Monday night. I believe the Celtics still win that series. I think we're heading for a rematch in the Eastern Conference Finals. That game is at Madison Square Garden, and the Knicks will desperately try to save game 4 and go up 3-1. But I just think the Celtics, you kind of like you knocked around the beehive and they're mad. And now, I mean, the Celtics have been the best team, I would say, for 95% of that series. It was only the 220 game or 220-point leads they blew, and they blew it. It's not like the Knicks took it. I mean, obviously the Knicks had to perform in those moments, but the Celtics got 3 happy and just absolutely just bled that game, both of those games away. So looks like the Pacers are heading for the Eastern Conference Finals. Should anything crazy happen, or shouldn't anything crazy happen, they should win this series, because 3-1 is a commanding lead, as they would call it. So that's it for me. We're going to jump over and record that preview coming up here soon. Might do it tonight, might do it tomorrow night. But either way, we're going to record it. That preview will be available. I'll probably try to make that preview available on Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday morning around 7 a.m. So as you're listening on your commute or pregame, I'll make that Game 5 preview available for you on Tuesday. We'll do the game. We'll make this live tomorrow. I've been typically trying to shoot around like 1 p.m. Eastern time for these to drop, so that people have something to listen to on lunch breaks or on their drive home, and then at night when they get home on Monday nights. So yeah, I'll shoot for tomorrow around 1 p.m. Eastern time for these podcasts. But thanks for listening. If you've gotten this far, really appreciate the support. We're on all socials at the Pacers Fever Show. We are on YouTube as well, if you want to see the visual portion of this podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find us. And also, we will be covering the Indiana Fever, whose season starts coming up, I think, at the end of the week, or this coming weekend. So really excited about covering the Indiana Fever. We will be covering that along with the rest of the Pacers playoff run. So be looking forward for those episodes. Those will drop usually after games, Fever games and stuff like that, when we do start covering the Fever. But we're going to do a season preview for the Indiana Fever coming up this week sometime. We will be talking all things Fever as well as Pacers. So stick around. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, rate over on Apple and Spotify. When you rate the podcast, it helps people find us. We really appreciate the support so far. Game 4 was very exciting, and these Pacers are just one game away from heading back to the Eastern Conference Finals.